Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, I look back at a hectic Week 7 of the 2025 NFL season. I looked at the implications of the Bengals win over the Steelers on Thursday Night Football.
You never know, the Bengals could actually do this. They could actually go on and win this division.
And I look back at the end of another year of London NFL games.
Just want to thank everyone who made it such a great 3 weeks. Hopefully got more to come.
Hope you all enjoy.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host today, Andy Davis, as we are here to review Week 7 of the 2025 NFL season. And once again, I am riding solo as we once again review the latest action in the NFL season, and of course what happened in London, what happened on a double slate on Monday Night Football, as well as Thursday and Sunday Night Football, and what game stood out for me in Week 7. Now, of course, what a place to start other than Bengals Steelers Thursday Night Football. I mean, this was deemed the OAP Bowl. It was deemed as, the oldest quarterback matchup in history. And it turned out to be an absolute thriller. In the end, it was a win for the Bengals by 33-31, getting just their third win of the season and just their first win since the conclusion of Week 2. Which now moves them to 3-4. The Steelers to 4-2, which opens up this AFC North massively. So I think you look at the Ravens, how they're doing at the moment. They've only won one game. The Browns, we'll get onto more of them in a minute. But now, rather than potentially going into Week 8 next week, where the Steelers will be 5-2, the Bengals 2-5, that's already a 3-win gap. But now, with the Bengals just one win behind the Steelers and at the moment having a tiebreak over them due to that win on Thursday Night Football, you never know. The Bengals could actually do this. They could actually go on and win this division. And of course, Joe Burrow, hopefully for them back in December. I think that, I said it before, I said it when he got injured. If they can just stay afloat, if they can just stay in that 5-6, 6-7, 7-6, 8-8 sort of territory, I think if they can just remain there, and with the fortune they're going to get from no Lamar Jackson for the next few weeks, the Ravens already lost 5 games this year. The Browns, are the team you all thought they'd be, not very good. I think this opens a massive gap for when, if Flacco can just keep them playing how they were playing on Thursday night, I think by far now this is him the starter for the foreseeable until Burrow is back. I think Browning's time as the starter this season is certainly over unless Flacco gets injured. So I think if Flacco can just keep the ball rolling and keep this, this performance he made against the Steelers going, then I think you never know. Now he'll want to have a better defensive performance than what the Bengals put out against the Steelers. But they got the Jets next, who of course haven't won a game this year so far. They got the Bears, tough game. They got the Steelers again. Now that's a big game for me. Week 11 against Steelers. If they can beat the Jets, and even if they lose to the Bears, again to Week 11. And if they're one win behind the Steelers, or even level on wins, then that'll be such a huge win if they can go out and do that. Obviously, it's at Pittsburgh, tough place to go. And they've got the Patriots, they've got the Bills, the Ravens twice, which I think will be from them, plus the Dolphins then in Week 16, and the Cardinals Week 17, and the Browns Week 18. The schedule is favourable in the sense that if they'll lose some games. Obviously, they'll probably lose to the Bills, the Patriots, and maybe even one of the Ravens games if Lamar Jackson's back healthy. So this Bengals team for me, I think they showed a lot for me. I mean, it was a game where I thought you really saw the best out of Jamar Chase. I think he broke a reception record for most consecutive receptions. He had a tremendous day, 161 yards, 1 touchdown. And even Chase Brown, 108 yards from 11 carries. Didn't get a touchdown, but I was really impressed with how this Bengals team fought on a shorter week. I think it's always impressive when you get a win like this on a shorter week. But I thought it was overall, a day for running backs. I mean, Jaylen Warren had 127 yards for the Steelers, but I think the difference was in this game, Metcalf was their lead receiver with just 5 receptions for 50 yards. Rodgers did get 4 touchdowns, and he did spread it out. Of course, Pat Freiermuth was the main protagonist in this game. 2 touchdowns, 111 yards. So it was just, for me, it was the perfect game. It was a perfect game of NFL football, in my opinion. It wasn't 50-47. It wasn't 45-41, which would be good. but I think we saw a little bit of defensive magic at times in this game. But I think a game like this, that's end to end, that goes down to the final moment of the game. I think that's all you want. That's all you want. You don't want a game that's over by halftime. You don't want a game where low scoring games are tight and they are fun in that sense, but you want a game where it's tight and there's lots of points scored. So for me, perfect game. I think Steelers, I don't think this will rock them too much. I think they'll be absolutely fine. Whether they win the division, I don't know. But certainly, I think this shouldn't be a result that should send panic waves into the Steelers fan base, because they've been, until that point, 4-1. And, they were a team that everyone was saying could win the AFC North and might win the NFC. I think they could still win the AFC North with how fortunate they've been with the Lamar Jackson stuff. But, they can't perform like that again on defense. It was a pretty poor display from their defense, which has been at times really good. So, great game. I think that's a good effort for the sport. And I think this for me was, I think, game of the week. I think game of the week on paper was Buccaneers Lions, but I think the actual game that was the best was this, or maybe one that happened on Sunday. We'll get more to that later on. Let's move on to Sunday, the final of the London games, as the Rams took on the Jaguars, 4-2 teams. In the end, the Rams completely destroyed the Jaguars by 35 points to 7. Matt Stafford broke a London record by the most touchdowns in any game for any quarterback in London games history, with 5 in total. He had 182 yards, 5 touchdowns. And I felt like this game for me was, in terms of quarterbacks, almost a lesson for Lawrence. It was almost a clinic. It was a complete mismatch. I think Stafford showed why he is surely a future Hall of Famer. I thought Lawrence was poor. Did have more yards than Stafford, but he didn't, and also he didn't actually throw an interception. That's one thing that blew my mind. How poor he was, he didn't actually throw an interception, but it was poor. It was really poor from him. Really poor from the Jags. I was really hopeful for the Jags team in this game. I thought they'd win the game because they're more used to London. They flew in a lot earlier. The Rams came to Baltimore all week. They flew out on Saturday. And, from an NFL UK point of view, it's actually really bad for the UK fan base, because if teams are going to, or should I say, it's more damaging for the UK media. So, we get opportunities all the time to go and, go to these team press conferences. They get to watch them practice. We saw on Friday the Jags had fans come down and they got to watch the team practice. But the Rams can go out and win a game without doing all the media stuff, without having to spend too long in London. I can see more teams doing it. I really can. Now, they might think, okay, maybe the Jags are just really bad, and maybe, and another team may have gone out and lost his games to the Jags. But if teams see this and they see how well they've done, and the fact they've gone out and they've travelled so soon to the game, and they can spend a week still in the States, and they can go out, come back to the US and have less of an issue in terms of jet lag. I think for us UK media people, people who get to these lucky opportunities, these really fortunate chances to go and see these teams train, talk to players, I think it's really damaging for the NFL UK media circle. But going back to the game, I think that was another bad thing for the UK fans, is that London's team was really poor. Now, they've been used to, losing games by ball tools and, other players, and Doug Marrone is your head coach. But this Jaguars team had a lot of hope going into the season, a lot of hope going into this game, with just 2 losses, 4 wins, including that Monday Night Football win against the Chiefs. But yeah, it was not good at all for me for the Jags. I thought it was really poor. Eaton didn't get going, only 8 carries, 44 yards. The one bright spark for the Jags in the whole game was Travis Hunter. He had 101 yards, his first ever career touchdown. He was literally the only bright spark. The defense was really poor. Not a single sack recorded from this Jags defense, whereas there were 7 sacks by this Rams defense. And Sean McVay was in high praise of this Rams team in his post-match press conference, and Matt Stafford, really good performance from him. Now, we didn't even see the run game really get going. Kieran Williams had less than 60 yards, didn't get a touchdown in this game, didn't really need to. It was Devontae Adams who stole the show, 3 touchdowns, a hat-trick at Wembley, which not many can say in any sport. Yeah, and he only had 35 yards. It was just he was just a real threat in the red zone. It was a real dominant performance from him, and he's not the guy he once was. He's not going to be a number one receiver, but I think with how Puka Nacua was absent, I really admire how they managed to overcome this. This is actually something I asked Matt Stafford post game. Matthew, of course, you threw Devontae Adams today for 3 touchdowns. No Nacua, your main receiver, out. How much confidence does that give you, the fact that you can have injuries and players out and still be able to throw to these guys and manage to get the points up?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the game. In the NFL, we deal with injuries week in and week out. Obviously, not having Puka out there was a big one. Tutu was kind of limited, after the first drive of the game or second drive of the game, it felt like. So we had some guys step up and make some plays. Obviously, Devontae's, as good a receiver, has been in this league for a long time. So really happy for his day. He did a nice job. Obviously getting open, making some great plays in the red zone. Putting the ball in the end zone for us. So we're lucky to have him, and just happy that we got it done.
But elsewhere, I was really pleased to see the likes of Terrence Ferguson getting a touchdown. His first as an NFL player. So this Rams team, for me, I had him down, before the season started, before the Matt Stafford injury came out, as my NFC champions, and then this injury came out about his back, so I went for the Lions. Now, I think for me, it's one of the Lions, Bucks, Eagles, or Rams, and I think Rams are going to be right up there. I think this performance, reminded everyone that this team is going to be, a force to be reckoned with come January, come playoff football. Quick thing I want to touch on the London series. I know I mentioned the London game before. Just want to thank everyone who made it such a great 3 weeks. Hopefully got more to come. Madrid and Berlin, and Dublin was great as well. But in terms of London, so many good memories with many different friends of the show I've been with this, this last few weeks. Of course, Freddie and Sky and Shane, the 3 guys I spent most time with in NFL media. Of course, Shane was actually in Kansas City for the Chiefs Raiders game, which, just a spoiler alert, they did win by 30 points to 0 in this game. A real dominant performance. Sorry, 31-0, but a real dominant performance from the Chiefs against this poor Raiders team. But many others I have to thank for this last few weeks. Will Varney from TalkSport came on the show last week in person, and I had a lot of time with him in terms of, we often got the same train without even realising. We got a few Ubers back to the train station together. Had a good chat with him, helped him out a little bit with his TalkSport coverage on Friday at the practice for the Jags, in terms of making sure the camera was right for him, making sure it was all recording. Other people like Anthony Wootton and Ben Collins from the BBC, and spent a lot of time with them, helped out Ben on Sunday with some audio so he could transcribe McVay's post-game press conference. Anthony gave me a lot of advice about applying for jobs and working in the industry. Of course, the Hanover boys, who, of course, are the guys that we deal a lot with in terms of the PR and comm side of things with NFL. So thank you to Alex and Ross and many others, Rich as well. Gave me actually a really good debate that I want to bring into the podcast in the off season. Many more people who I can't thank enough. American TJ, who came on the show a few weeks ago, met him in person on the sidelines at London, and on the sidelines got to be around some really cool people. This is in addition to interviewing Dan Byrne at the Broncos practice facility, where I also got to interview Sean Payton. Met Micah Richards, was around Jason Sudeikis and Coach Beard from Ted Lasso. Joel Bayer, who works in the industry. A guy called Yarns, who's been on my football podcast, or my former football podcast. Many more. And of course, getting to interview so many cool faces from the NFL. Kevin O'Connell, Mike Tomlin, Aaron Rodgers, Justin Jefferson, Liam Cohen, Matthew Stafford. The list goes on. It's just been an amazing 3 weeks. Add on Dublin as well. Incredible few weeks. And I can't wait, hopefully, for Berlin, Madrid. But let's move on to the rest of Sunday now. Quick touch on the Dolphins loss. Pretty poor now. Due to my time commitments at these games in London, I didn't actually get to watch this game, so I can't speak too much. But from what I've read, what I've seen, I'm yet to watch the highlights. It just sounds like an absolute disaster performance. And moving on to 1-6, I think the season's done. I think it already was after the Panthers lost, but I think any small hope of maybe a late season resurgence, and get that sneaker wildcard spot is well and truly gone. And I think now you look at next season. I think now you look at potentially, do you just tank for the rest of the season, and do you just let the team play this poorly and just go into next season, hope you can get a top prospect in the draft. Now, of course, McDaniel has been the talk in the last few days, and after we saw Tua get benched as well. I think personally, a lot of fans have said this, just let him stay till season. I think there's talk of Stephen Ross having, high hopes for him. And I think they're saying what I'm reading up on is the fact that right now he has no plans to get rid of McDaniel because he has faith he can turn it around. But I think a few losses more and that could change. Now, personally, I don't see any point in hiring an interim coach. I don't see any reason why we should try and galvanise the season and get some wins later on, because that's what cost us Joe Burrow. That is what cost us Joe Burrow. If we had tanked properly, if we'd actually gone out and lost all the games we were meant to lose, we would have got Joe Burrow. And whether he would have been the same quarterback in Miami as he is Cincinnati, I don't know, but he can certainly overcome offensive lines to make Super Bowls. So, yeah, I think we have to just tank properly. I think we have to just write the season off. Obviously, still play hard, but just don't make any changes. I don't think personally I want anyone to come in and try and revitalise his locker room, because what's the point in winning 3 or 4 games in the last 5 or 6? What, you can have the 8th pick rather than the 2nd pick? I'd rather have the 2nd pick personally, or the 3rd pick. I do not want to have to go through another season where we're picking midway through the first round. We've not got anyone, generational. I think I look at this Lions team. Jared Goff, as good as he's been, he was 3-13-1 in his first season. What happened in the off season? They got Penei Sewell 7th overall, and they went out and next season saw a massive improvement, made an NFC Championship game, or was it the year afterwards? Either way, Penei Sewell was a huge difference maker in his Lions team, and it's no coincidence their fortunes have turned around since he became a Lion. And I think whilst he was 7th overall, not 2nd overall, I do think you can trade down. I think you could trade down, because I've been speaking to Ben Isaacs, and there's not really a prospect offensive line wise that you can get in the first 8 picks. So maybe you can go down to 5th, get a couple of first rounders, or get a 2nd round and out of it, and that 5th, 6th, 7th overall pick. And I think at that point, you go out and get someone like that. So for me, this is where I stand on it. I think it'd be great to see it if we went out and went 11-6, made the playoffs, but I don't see it happening. We've got the Bills still to play, and many other good teams. So for me, yeah, it's not ideal. It's not ideal at all. But I think you have to just ride it out, take the L, treat the season as, okay, it's the end of an era, but Daniel's probably going to be gone. Tua, I don't know what happens with him, and I think we'll see a lot of players sadly go. Bradley Chubb, I love. There's talk of him being traded. Jalen Phillips, I think Jalen Phillips is the one that would really break my heart, because yes, he's had the injury problems. Yes, he is getting older, and his contract expires, I think, next season, or maybe even next off season. But the injury record he has, if he wants to leave, fair enough, because he's only stayed fit a couple of seasons. But it's a shame, because he is a guy that he played in Miami in college. He was a real future we had of the franchise. And, sadly, I think it feels like, from what I'm reading up on, that we're going to get rid of him potentially before the trade deadline. But let's move on to the rest of Sunday's slate. Now, there were wins for the Bears against the Saints, who won by 26-14, as well as this. I mentioned before, the Browns beat the Dolphins by 31-6. The Patriots beat the Titans by 31-13, as Mike Vrabel got a win against his former team. The Jets are still winless, as they move to 0-7 with a 13-6 loss to the Carolina Panthers. The Eagles narrowly edged out the Minnesota Vikings by 28-22, and the Colts beat the Chargers 38-24 to go 6-1, and the Packers beat the Cardinals 27-23 to go 4-1-1, and the Cowboys beat the Commanders by 44-22. And then, of course, again, I want to talk about, again, that caught my eye, was the Broncos-Giants game. This was, for me, the game of the week. I think it narrowly edges out, Steelers-Broncos. Steelers Bengals, I should say. What a game! What a game! We saw everything. We saw the Giants, race to a massive lead. I mean, at the end of the third quarter, it was 19-0 to the Giants, and at that point now, albeit I was watching it via highlights the next day because I got back late from London. I did try and avoid the results, but I was watching it thinking they're 19-0 up. I thought there was no way they'd lose this game, and then the Broncos came back, but then the Giants found a way to take the lead again. I mean, Jackson Dart got a touchdown, rushing one late on in the game. Now this was 40 seconds left. It made it 32-30. But then what happens in the end? You had the extra point miss from Jude McCatamey. And of course, that was sadly the difference. And, a shame for us, UK and Ireland NFL fans, because he is from Ireland. And yeah, sadly, you've seen a lot of social media hate this week. But yeah, that's not something you want from any player. So, don't agree with that at all. But after that, you had, the Marvin Mims 29-yard catch. You had the penalty on Brian Burns. Cortland Sutton, 22 yards. And then Will Lutz got the game-winning field goal. And there was record set for Bo Nix. He was the first player to record 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the same quarter. Shout out to Colin Coward for that quote on the hood. But the reason why it stood out for me was not even just how good the game was and how it ended back and forth it was and how much connotations it had for the AFC West potentially and even the NFC East. But we saw before the game there was a pillar unveiled for Demaryius Thomas, the late Demaryius Thomas, as well as his unveiling in the Ring of Honor. You saw that done before the game, and the pillar was put next to Peyton Manning, who of course had that great connection with him, when they were together with the Broncos. And I think with all the emotion behind the game, that was for me, that was a win for Demaryius Thomas. That was, if there's any evidence of someone who's passed away, his spirit living on and having some sort of impact on the win, I think that was it for me. That was a win for Demaryius Thomas and made by him. I think there was a lot of stuff going on, and I think that was for me such a beautiful moment for this Broncos fan base and Broncos team. Peyton Manning watching on as well, and a lot of players who were there for the Super Bowl 50 win they had with him were there. And I felt like with all that, going on, this was a meant to be win. This was a real, moment of fate for Broncos. I think this was for me absolutely a game that I'm sure he'd be looking down on right now and looking at it with a lot of pride and a lot of joy watching on his old team winning a game like that. And of course, it means they stay right now afloat with the Chiefs in the AFC West. The Chargers, they've lost 3 games now in the last 4. The Broncos keep winning, however. So I think for them, I think I said it before, with this Chiefs team, you got to just keep winning games at the moment, because right now they're only one win ahead of the Chiefs, and they play the Chiefs still. I believe it is it once or is it twice? It is, yes, twice. So still got to play them twice. So they are 2 huge games. I think they've got to just keep winning these games prior to this and then in between the 2 games. So for me, this Broncos team haven't been perfect. I think Bo Nix showed at times inconsistency, not today, Sunday, but also just the season in general. But win's a win, and I was really impressed with their sort of fight and spirit in this game to keep going and not put their heads down and bench players and think the game's done, to keep the ball rolling and to get the win. So yeah, fair play to the Broncos for getting that win. Finally, before we go on to the final game, there was a win for the the 49ers against the Falcons on Sunday night football. McCaffrey having 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards, and the Niners moved to 5-2 despite all the injuries they had going on, or they have going on this season. And then other games than that, the Seahawks beat the Texans by 27-19. There was a great performance from Jackson Smith and Jigba. That was 123 yards and 1 touchdown. Again, that was on 3 a.m. in the UK, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. in Seattle time. And whilst I was getting ready for work and I was trying to avoid the game before, because I watched it on the way to work, this game would have been on when I woke up to work, which for me is a crazy prospect, because 6 a.m. is a time where there's never any NFL games on at all. So I could have easily sat down, had my breakfast, had a chill for like an hour before I go to work, watching a game of NFL live, which for me, I only really get around about work times when the Thanksgiving games are on. I can get the bus home from work and I can watch NFL games on the bus and then watch it when I get in. So it was a weird feeling, and I would love to have, been able to watch it live, but I did want to really watch that Buccaneers Lions game because it was for me the game of the week on paper, and I still think it could be an NFC Championship preview. And yeah, otherwise that would have been a hell of experience watching NFL game live before work. But yeah, Lions Bucks. Quick word on that: it was a 24-9 win for the Buccaneers, preventing the Buccaneers going back to the top of the NFC rankings in terms of seeding. This now is in possession of the Packers, but it was a really, I thought, poor performance from the Buccaneers. I think Baker Mayfield didn't quite have the performance we thought he would, being still for me the MVP front runner, but I probably did his chance of getting MVP a little bit of damage in this game. We saw a great touchdown from Tez Johnson where he hurdled his man, and there was some great blocking from the O-line, and they got 4 sacks. Buccaneers did, but the Lions, I think the thing for me in this game was not even just Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 2 touchdowns, 136 yards. It was the defense. It was the defense for me. They put on a hell of a performance. There was, so many great third down plays from them, making the stops on this Baker Mayfield and Buccaneers offense. Of course, Mike Evans out for most of the season now. He injured himself in this game, but the Lions, even with Jake Bates missing a field goal early on, the Lions team was just amazing on defense. They gave problems to the Buccaneers team all day long. And this is a team that, we were saying had the Lions number in recent years. But this for me was, I think, the performance which, I'll say the Lions were winning the NFC before the season started in our season predictions episode. And that performance for me reaffirmed my faith in this Lions team to actually win the NFC this year. I thought it was just dominant from start to finish. There were just so many plays in this game which I was really impressed with. Jack Campbell made a great play on third down. There was more things to be positive about than negative about. I thought it was overall a statement performance from the Lions, a team that was, until that game ended, the number 1 seed in the NFC. And it was just, I think the Lions, for me, absolutely proved they could be the team that we thought they would be, or could be, at the start of the year. So yeah, really impressed with the Lions over the Buccaneers. Buccaneers will, I think, learn a lot from this game. And I think the injuries, for me, I'm hoping won't catch up with them because I want Baker to do well. But yeah, Mike Evans out for most of the season. This is the course after he made a great catch early on in this game. I just feel like this could be a game that potentially long-term could damage the Buccaneers when it comes to the playoffs. But, when you got Ibuka there, Cade Otton, Bucky Irving, they're still a good team, and the defense is still good despite the points they gave up on Monday Night Football. So, yeah, for me, great win for them. The Buccaneers, I'm sure they'll be back next week. But there we are. That is the end of our Week 7 review. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you all for making the London Games possible every year with your support of this podcast, whether it's liking the podcast, sharing it, reviewing on Apple Podcasts. Keep doing it if you haven't already. Keep sharing the word, keep sharing the love of this podcast as we try to make it, even more bigger than we hope it already is. But in the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast with your host, as ever, Andy Davis, and we'll see you guys next time.